John Sonmez, welcome to the Man of War podcast, man. It is an honor to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, honored to be here.
Awesome, man. So I've been following you for a while, and you're one of those guys that speaks about the mindset, about that drive, that focus. So I love that. I like to get around men who are, executing at a high level and who have that sharpness of mind. So before we get started, can you introduce yourself to everybody, those who may not know you?
Sure. Yeah. I'm John Sonmez. I started out as a software developer, actually a very kind of geeky, shy, introverted software developer, and I eventually learned how to really get out of my shell and to build self confidence and become a more masculine man and learn what that was. And really get rid of the victim mindset. And that's where I came up with the idea of the bulldog mindset. It's the opposite of the victim mindset. And so what I have been doing and what I do is I teach men how to get rid of the victim mindset, how to really become the best versions of themselves. And I coach them in a lot of different areas, from everything from dating and women in relationships to building their finances and getting in shape, conquering their physical limitations, and it's all really focused on mindset, right? Because mindset is the key. Because my strong belief is that if you change your inner world, that's what changes the external, and so that's kind of been my focus. I've had a lot of different things I've done over the years, from real estate investing to building businesses and working as a software developer. But the key thing that underlies everything is really the mindset part of it.
I love that. So the name of your company is Bulldog Mindset. When did you start this?
Yeah, I guess it's been probably 7 years or maybe 8 years now.
When did you start your company called Bulldog Mindset?
Yeah, so I guess it's been probably about 8 years now since I started Bulldog Mindset.
Okay. And what was the idea behind the company itself?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. At the time when I started Bulldog Mindset, I had a different YouTube channel that was called Simple Programmer when I was teaching software developers, and I had sort of morphed that channel into more personal development for software developers. And people kept on asking me, how do you get that bulldog mindset that you have, John? And multiple people had said that same exact thing. So I said, okay, well, let me actually branch off, create a new brand, a new company focused on teaching men how to be masculine, how to develop the bulldog mindset, and that's where that came from.
Cool. So your focus right now, so I understand, is really trying to develop a strong mindset for men, right? Specifically to kind of shave away or maybe even kill or destroy that victim mindset, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. All right, so let's kind of backtrack here. Nowadays, we see men across the board,
Mhm.
everywhere from every walk of life, no matter whether they are high, guys that at high positions or low positions. The bottom line is they have these victim mentalities. It's all about the environment around them. It's all about, the situations around them. What can we do here, right? To start shifting the paradigm, to start changing that mindset of it's, oh my goodness, I'm a victim, right? So give me a couple of ideas of where you would start someone from scratch.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing about this is, and a lot of kind of my beliefs are rooted in Stoic philosophy, right? That this idea that we have to have this mindset shift of thinking about what are the things that are inside of our control versus the things that are outside of our control. Because when things are outside of our control, it takes away the power that we have to change those things, right? And it doesn't really matter, right? Because if we can't control that thing, then why are we spending effort and energy focused on that or worrying about that thing? And I think really the big thing for someone who wants to get rid of that victim mindset and start having a more positive, like I said, what I call the bulldog mindset, is that you have to start looking at the world in a different way. And you have to start thinking about, how can I take as much personal responsibility for my life as possible? Because the more stuff that I can attribute to me and within my control, then the more control that I have over my future. And right. So the problem with the victim mindset thinking is that I'm externalizing everything. I'm saying that everything, it's society, it's women are horrible, whatever. It's like blaming everyone else for my problems, which means that I'm just a victim of circumstance. I have no control. I have no sovereignty in my life. And so, in order to reverse that, the first thing we have to do is to start to say, okay, how much of this can I take back onto myself? There's things I can't control. That's fine. But if I change my focus instead of these things that are outside of my control to the things that are inside my control, then then I start taking responsibility for that. Stop blaming other people. Now I suddenly have all this power. I thought I was a victim. I thought I was helpless, but now I have power and sovereignty over my life. And so that's really that first step is just being willing to get rid of this idea that it's someone else's fault, because it doesn't matter, right? I think the thing is, it doesn't matter whether it's someone else's fault or not. It's still your responsibility, right? So a good example I give a lot of my coaching clients is, let's say you're driving your car, okay, and someone rear ends you. Well, okay, it's their fault because they rear-ended you. Yeah, probably it's their fault. That's fine, but it doesn't matter because let's say they don't have insurance. Well, it's your car. Your car is dented up, whatever. It's your responsibility. You can get mad at them. You can say, oh, well, they shouldn't have been driving like that, or they should have had insurance, or whatever it is. But ultimately, you're the one that's going to have to take your car into the shop. You're the one who's going to have to deal with that problem, and it's your responsibility. So, the idea is that it doesn't matter. We're always looking for whose fault it is, but it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It matters whose responsibility it is. And if it's your life, it's your responsibility.
Love that. So, where do you think it's coming from in our society? Where do you think that weakness, that victim mentality is coming from?
That's a hard question to answer. I think that we don't have real true masculine role models, very many in society today. Men are weak, right? I think there's three sexes. There is boys, there's men, and there's women. And we have a lot of boys, right? Because they haven't been initiated into manhood. They haven't actually gone through the trial of what it is to become a man. And so because of that, we're raising a society of boys who are blaming other people and blaming women and blaming society for their circumstances. And it's almost like a badge of honor. We've started rewarding people for wearing the victim badge. And so now there's a competition to who can be the most victim, right? The biggest thing, though, that I think that's plaguing young men in society today is a lack of pride, right? Men have lost the idea of what it means to have pride as being a man, right? I had a friend of mine who was in the Marines, and he would tell me, he would say, "Hey, John, the Marines, we have the worst food, the worst sleeping conditions. We go out to
Right.
battle first. Like we've got the worst of everything. The Air Force guys, they got it a lot easier. The Army guys even have it easier. But the Marines, we have the shittiest of equipment, shittiest of everything." And he's like, and that's why I'm proud to be a Marine. And I was like, this guy gets it, right? It's like being a man, like pride in being a man is saying, yeah, life is harder for me, and it should be, and that's the value of it. It's like, I'm willing to make sacrifices. Yeah, I like the fact that there is adversity is a good thing because it gives me a reason to rise above that, and I take pride in the fact that it wasn't given to me, that it isn't easy, right? Whereas if you don't have that pride, then what happens? Then if life is hard, then you say, "Oh, well, it's not fair, right? It should be fair." That's where we get this victim mindset. But if you take pride in being a man, in understanding masculinity, and understanding that the value, the virtue of being a man is that you overcome hard things, that you do things that other people wouldn't be willing to do, and you take pride in that, then you start seeing these things in life that you see as that you might have seen before as unfair, or that would give you the victim mindset, but you see them as challenges and obstacles to overcome that allow you to forge yourself and to prove yourself, and to take pride in who you are as a man. But we've lost that. And that's why so many young men are lost, is because they have no idea of what pride means, like the good version of pride.
Yeah, very, very true. And along with pride, I think also they have lost a sense of purpose. Many men, or have never found it.
Hmm.
Because I believe that a purpose-driven man is unstoppable. I think that he can overcome any type of mindset. It doesn't matter whether it's a victim mindset or just a sedated mind, state of mind. I think a purpose-driven man, if he's able really truly to connect with his purpose, he can overcome just about anything. But what you're saying here is great because, yeah, I mean, it's that sense of pride. We've lost that edge, man. We've lost it as far as overall society. It's very rare. It's pride in how you do things, right? Because I believe how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? I mean, and it's the little things, the finer little things that we have lost that sense of saying, hey, you know what? I am proud of doing this. Flipping burgers, I'm going to be the best of the best.
Exactly.
Going out there and washing cars, I'm going to be the best of the best. That type of mentality, it's unfortunately it's not in our society. So I love that. So let's talk a little bit about fear,
Hmm.
okay? And because I believe that fear is a life destroyer, not just for men, but for pretty much anyone. Have you dealt with men who have been challenged with overcoming fears in their lives that were basically stopping them from becoming the best version of themselves?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is something that I personally had to face myself because I was an extremely fearful person. I allowed fear to start taking a foothold on my life, thinking that fear would go away, but not realizing that fear only grows and it takes over more and more of your life, right? This kind of started for me back around after September 11th happened, and then I developed a bit of a fear around flying on airplanes. Right. Before then, I had flown on airplanes, and it got to a point where what I made the mistake of again letting fear grow by allowing myself to give into that fear and not flying on flights, delaying some flights, and then it got to the point where after a couple of years, I was terrified to go on a flight. I had to go visit relatives for Christmas. I literally canceled the flight the previous day. It got bad.
Crazy,
You know,
crazy.
I was afraid to fly on roller coaster or to not to fly on roller coasters. Hopefully you don't fly on roller coaster, but to ride on roller coasters. I was afraid to. Eventually, I got to this point where this kind of peaked, and I got this cough one day when I was going to work, and I felt like I couldn't get enough air, and I got this into this panic, and I went into a panic attack that lasted for weeks. I got to this point in life where I had allowed fear to take over so much of my life that it resulted in this
Yeah.
this final test, and I would go to work, and I remember that I couldn't even focus on anything. I was just in this constant panic attack. And I would go to work and I would literally go into the bathroom and sit on a stall just so I can be by myself and and just wait the time down. I was going to lose my job for sure. I would go home and sit in the bathtub, and this lasted for a couple weeks. I tried everything that I could possibly think of to get over this, to get past this, and nothing was working. And then finally, I don't even remember where I heard this, but I heard somewhere on the internet someone was talking about fear, and they said, or panic attacks, and they said when you have a panic attack, instead of trying to block things out, instead of trying to distract yourself, right, which is what I was trying to play a video game or read a book or something like that, feel it 100% and try to crank it up to an 11. So I was like, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose to do this. And so I tried that. Instead of doing what I normally did of blocking out the fear and what I cranked it up to 11. I was like, okay, let me feel as much fear as I possibly can. And it was instantly, I was cured, just like that. And so immediately, the very next day, I booked a flight. I said, okay, if this worked for this panic attacks, it'll work for a flight. So I booked a flight, window seat. Normally, I would not pick a window seat up in the front of the plane, and I forced myself, no headphones, no Game Boy, nothing. Sit on that flight, look out the window on takeoff. You know what I mean? And when there's turbulence, just bounce up and down with the turbulence, and I was terrified, but I made myself feel all of that fear, and boom. I was scared ever since then. I mean, I've flown on hundreds of planes. I did the same thing with roller coasters. I've gone on the craziest roller coasters. A couple months ago, I skydived for the first time, right? And so, what I learned from this, and I've helped a lot of guys to be able to overcome their fear, is that the thing that we have to do if we want to conquer fear is we can't avoid it. We can't hope it'll go away. We have to face it head on, and we have to be willing to go through the uncomfortable feeling of feeling that fear. Because once we realize that, you've probably heard the expression that the only thing that you really have to fear is fear itself. That is so, so true. And once you actually experience that and realize that and face those fears head on and allow yourself to feel all of that emotion, boom, then you don't have that fear you're not going to feel, or you're not going to fear the fear anymore. And then you can, but if you don't do that, it will take over your life. It will take over more and more of your life. And that was my personal experience.
It's like bacteria growing, it's like little by little, you let it, sit for a little bit longer and it grows more and it grows more and eventually it consumes your life. One of the things that I have found about fear is that it's never as bad as what you thought it was going to be on the other side. How many times have you're scared to do something, and finally, you get the balls to do it, and then you realize, like, wow, it was not even close to what I was thinking about. Or I wasn't expecting this. So the other side usually is not nearly as bad as you have it visualized in your mind. And I believe fear is something that keeps a lot of men in check, and it keeps them, unfortunately, it prevents them from growing.
Oh yeah.
So, that's a big deal. Talk to me a little bit about when it comes to overcoming hard challenges, and when I say hard challenges, I'm talking about difficulties like losing a job, losing a loved one, maybe even going into alcohol and drugs, and getting into a world where now you're stuck, right? And the next step is to figure a way out, or, and I literally mean this, like, figure a way out one way or figure it out another way. So it's like, and unfortunately, a lot of people figure it out with, suicide thoughts. And the next thing you know, this person, ate a bullet. Okay. While the other men who are trying to overcome and trying not to get there and trying not to get depressed, these men here are the ones that, we can help. Right.
Right.
So, how do you, in your structure of coaching and your belief system, set a man straight to overcome these types of obstacles?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I think that the big thing, again, kind of go back to Stoic philosophy, right? In understanding that, all that you need really is within you. All of these external circumstances, if you make yourself beholden to fate, then you're always going to be on this roller coaster of the things that you can't control. If the things that are outside of you, the external validation and whatever's happening in your environment is going to determine your inner state, then you're always going to be at the mercy of that. And we don't have any control over that. So I think the
Yes.
first thing is to disconnect from that and to realize, okay, if I can insulate myself from that, and obviously it's better if you've already been practicing Stoic philosophy in doing this before you hit a disaster,
Yes.
because then you'll be prepared for that,
Right.
and you'll be able to handle it. But if you haven't, and now you've hit some kind of turning point or disaster in your life, one of the things that I think about is, in fact, I've got a tattoo. My only tattoo is on my arm. It's kind of hard to see here. It's hard to twist my arm like this, but it says the word pronoia. So most people aren't familiar with the word pronoia. It's the exact opposite of paranoia, right? So paranoia means the irrational fear that the universe is conspiring against you, or that everyone's conspiring against you, however you want to define that. Pronoia is the irrational belief that the universe is conspiring for you, right? And so what I have found in life, I was just talking to my daughter about this, about a few months ago. And because she was kind of in this down mood, she was being very negative. And I said, I found that the times in my life where I have thought that that everything is working against me and everything is going wrong, that is generally true. That has proven true, and more shit piles on to
Yeah.
the shit pile.
Yeah.
But I've also found that the times in my life where I have believed that the road always rises up to meet me, where I have believed that I live this semi-charmed life and that everything somehow works out for me, that's been true. And so the thing about that, and I think the understanding behind this is that there's not some kind of magic here. I mean, you can think about manifestation, law of attraction, and all of that stuff. And I have some belief in that stuff, but I don't think that's a very reliable thing to think about. Instead, I think what's better to understand this is not in some mystical terms, but in the sense that the whole heart of pronoia, of this mindset of thinking, of pronoia thinking, is this idea that whatever happens, I get to interpret it, right? Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning that, between when something happens to you and your response is a space. And in that space, you can interpret what that means, right? And that's the power that we have, and no one can take that away from us. And so the real power that we have is to interpret these events how we choose. And so if we have a pronoia mindset and we say, everything always works out for me, the road is always rising up to meet me, right? I live this great life and somehow it just always works in my favor, like the universe is conspiring to help me, then we can take all of those events and we can always interpret them because the events just happen. Right, it's our interpretation. Right, Shakespeare says, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It's our interpretation of the events that determines if they're good or bad in our assessment. And so when bad things happen to us that people outside of us objectively call bad, that's not necessarily bad, right? I can interpret that event and say, well, this is a good thing, because when I look back on my life, and I'm sure you can do the same thing, and anyone can, which is that when I look back at the very worst things that ever happened to me, looking back at them now, they're the best things, because those are the things that caused me to become the person I am. Those are the things that caused me to go through the trials and tribulations that grew my character and grew my strength and made me have the self-confidence in myself, knowing that I can overcome any obstacle. And so, but at that time, they might have felt like bad things. And so that whole idea behind pronoia is not that when you start thinking this way, magically all these good things happen in your life. I think there's some truth to that. But
Right.
the real key to it is that now I've changed the way that I'm interpreting the events. And if I interpret the events and everything that I see in my life, I interpret as good, as the universe conspiring for me, guess what? It doesn't matter. Because now it doesn't matter what the events are, because now I've changed my filter so that the way I interpret everything that happens to me, I see it in a positive way and I see it as helping me. And that changes my entire mindset. It changes my outlook in life. And no longer am I tied to external events, because whatever happens, I've now created a filter in my mind that makes it a positive thing. That's how we really achieve that kind of that stoic, mastery in thinking, and that's how we have inner peace, right? And so that's really the key thing is putting that into place where we're changing the way we interpret events, because there's no way that we can just get ourselves out of some bad situation. There's no guarantee that we're going to be able to get ourselves out of some bad situation, because there's no guarantee in life, but there is a guarantee that we can control how we interpret it. And so when we reframe these events in our lives to see what is good about them, or why is this good, that's how we really get out of those pits.
Very good. Talk to me about emotion and men. And a lot of people want to talk about men should be more emotional.
Hmm.
Men should be a little bit more open with their feelings. I've been studying Stoicism for 20 years,
Yeah.
and I, like yourself, I believe a lot in really remaining centered and focused, not going too high in the highs and not too low in the lows, right? Maintaining that even keel type of mindset. The problem is that we have so much emotions, right? Men are emotional creatures, but the media and people around us are always talking about let it out, let these emotions out. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I've got two ways that I talk about this that I think are both really important. So the first one is just emotions in general. Like, how do we handle emotions, right? So there are three ways that we can handle emotions, right? We can either express them, repress them, or process them. Right. And so here's kind of my visualization of this, right? So imagine emotions as a river coming at you,
Mhm.
right? And so if I have this river of emotion coming at me, I can deflect that river, right? So that if I deflect that river, that's expressing, right? So I'm pouring that river out onto everyone else, spilling my emotions out on everyone else. That's the expression part of it, right? That's not good. We don't want to do that. The second thing I could do is I have this river coming towards me. I don't want to spray it on anyone else. So what do? I absorb it all. I dam it all up, right? I just take it all in. Okay. I'm repressing it. I'm stuffing it down. That's not good either, because eventually that you're going to fill up and then you're going to explode and you will express those emotions in a negative way. The third thing that we can do is we have this river flowing at us. We can let it pass through us, right? We can feel the emotions, but we don't have to hold on to them. We don't have to spray them on everyone else. We don't have to repress them. We experience them, but then let them go, right? It's just a flow. Like, we're going to feel one way. We're not trying to stop from feeling a way, because that's not in our control. We just allow ourselves to feel what we feel, but we don't need to share it with everyone else. We don't need to like try and hide it and pretend like we're not upset, but we just experience the thing and let it go. Okay. The second part of this is what I call the levels of emotional mastery for man, right? And I think this is super critical, because it's not true that men shouldn't have emotions. It's not even true that men shouldn't express emotions at a time. I think that the positive ones, I think that's good. I think it's good to express love. These things, even some sorrow. The problem is how we do these things. In an uncontrolled way, right? So the first level of emotional mastery I call wearing your heart on your sleeve, right? Every young boy experiences this. It's where you get hurt, girl hurts you, whatever. You let everyone know. You're sad about it. You cry about it. Whatever it is, it's a weak way of being, because in this way your heart is open, but what's happening is that your actions are now dictated by your emotions. That's what makes you weak, right? It's a very feminine attribute that we would assign to a man who just wears his heart on his sleeve, because we know that he's weak. He's going to allow his emotions to control his actions. He's not trustworthy. Also, he's someone who could backstab you or betray you, because if he gets upset, what is he going to do? He's a hothead. He loses his temper. Those type of things. We got the second level of emotional mastery. This is what I call zombie mode, or numb, right? This is where maybe you've worn your heart on your sleeve for a long enough time. You've gotten hurt by doing that, by expressing your emotions openly. And so you're like, okay, if I don't have emotions, nobody can hurt me. So we start to become emotionless, right? Our color world turns black and white. And we see this as a coping strategy. A lot of men are stuck in this phase where they think this is a good thing. They think it's being stoic, because they're not experiencing emotions. They're basically stuffing everything down and not feeling things. The problem with that is that, yeah, maybe people can't hurt you, but you can't also experience love in that. Your heart is closed at that point, right? They're not dictating, your emotions aren't dictating your actions, because you're not really experiencing emotions, but you're not getting the good ones or the bad ones, which is not a great place to be either, right? Then we have the third level of emotional mastery, which I call feel the pain and keep on walking. At this level of emotional mastery, what you're doing is you're reopening your heart. You're experiencing emotions again. You're allowing yourself to feel the pain, but you keep on walking through it. You don't allow those emotions to dictate your actions. At this point, you're not controlled by your emotions, but you're a fully processing human being who processes their emotions, who isn't just a blank wall. It has the full human experience, but does not allow that to stop them and to control how they act and how they behave. Right. So this is a person who we would say is like a king. Does a king ever get angry? Sure, a king gets angry, but does a king get angry and throw a tantrum and throw a fit? Not a good king, not someone who would really consider a masculine role model, a general in an army that gets angry and throws a fit or cries and is scared, expresses all those things. That's not someone we want to follow or someone that we trust, right? Now, realistically, does a king or a general in an army, do they experience fear? Do they experience anger, these emotions? Yes, but they process them and they don't let it affect how they're leading and how they're reacting with other people, especially with women. I think this is a huge thing for men in relating to women, because women say, I want a man to be more emotional. I want him to be vulnerable, right? Women say that. Men interpret this as being a crybaby, telling her all of your fears and doubts and all this stuff. That's not what she wants. And they're like, okay, well, women say they want this, and then when I do this, they hate it, and they break up with me or whatever it is. What a woman really wants is a man who is in touch with his emotions, can process his emotions, has a healthy connection to them, but doesn't allow them to spill out on other people, and is still stoic and still does what he says he's going to do, doesn't allow those emotions to cloud his judgment and to change how he behaves, so that she can trust him and rely on him as a true north, as a compass, as a leader in his life. But so many men get the emotion thing so wrong, and it can really destroy your life if you do not learn as a man how to master your emotions instead of letting your emotions master you.
That's very true, specifically the mastering part. I believe that a lot of these violent situations, such as active shooters, and even some of these hard, cold-blooded murders, have been from men who have not been able to master their emotions. They let their emotions take over, and the next thing you know, they're committing something completely, out of character for them. They just let it become them. And this is unfortunately the world that we live in now, where we're letting men just kind of take these, like you mentioned earlier, let it be, let it be a river, let it flow through you. You can feel them, you can understand them, but let them go, right? My philosophy, it's the same thing, but it's more of, I look at it more as a bubbles, right? You have these feelings that kind of come in, they're bubbles, they rub against you, whatever, and you feel them, and then you just kind of let them go. Cool.
Yeah.
Whatever analogy we want to use. But the bottom line is that you cannot engage in these feelings, right? Because if you engage and you let them become you, and then you let them dictate how you act, how you respond to them, this is where it gets bad. This is where things start happening that really, almost uncontrollable things in your life. So moving down that same road, and I'm very interested in this next question here. So when men, when they have these certain emotions, when they have these certain feelings, what is it? Does it, from your studies and your background, does it come from something in their past, or is it something that is in the present moment that's triggering them to do this? Or is it, because a lot of psychologists will tell you, hey, this guy had a tough past. He didn't have a father. He didn't have this and whatever. And they stem everything from the past, what happened, in the past, or maybe, a PTSD situation where they still have, post-traumatic syndrome from wars or whatever it may be. So your study, more, is it these ways that men are acting nowadays? Is it because they have something from their past, or is it something that they're dealing with in the present?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that, I mean, here's kind of my take on this is that your past happened, right? And it would be ridiculous for me to say that traumatic events that happened in your past, let's say you're abused as a kid, I've coached a lot of guys that have had horrible things happen to them when they're children. It would be ridiculous for me to say that it has no influence on who you are today. Of course, it has an influence on who you are. It has shaped who you have become. However, it does not affect how you act and who you are in the future. You have control over that once you have the ability to recognize these things. And so the reason why I make this distinction is because so many men are staying in the victim mindset because they're saying, "Oh, this happened to me in the past. Oh, crying about all of these events, right?" And I can have empathy for people that have had a rough past. I've had a lot of hardships and things have happened in my life. A lot of people have. However, I don't allow that to define who I am now. I don't allow that to define who I am going to be in the future, right? I can look at my past and I can say, yeah, I can see why I had these attributes, or why that I am, have been this way. What has caused me to form these ways of thinking, or these patterns, right? Or these patterns of behavior. But that doesn't mean I'm not constrained by that. That doesn't mean that that's how I am and that I'm trapped in that. And so I think that it's dangerous when we look into the past to try to explain our behavior, instead of realizing that that's just an event. Because we can take the same, there's a story. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar one time, and he was talking about two brothers. One brother, they basically, they had an alcoholic father that beat them and abused them. And he talked to one of the brothers, and this one brother was super successful. The other brother was just had his life in shambles, was constantly in and out of rehab houses and all kinds of stuff. And he asked the one brother who was super successful, and he says, what would you attribute your success? Like, why were you so successful? And he said, oh, well, I can tell you why. Because I had this abusive father who was an alcoholic and drunk, and he used to beat me every day. And when I was young, I thought, I am never going to be like that. I am going to do everything in my power in my life to rise above those circumstances. And I realized that how important it is to take control of your life and never become that man. Right. The other brother, he talks to him and he says, well, why do you feel like your life is in such shambles, and you're in such a horrible condition? And he says, oh, because I had this alcoholic father. He beat me and abused me, and he taught me that it was pointless to fight and to struggle. That my struggle, it didn't mean anything, and that no matter what, I was just going to get beat down. And so that's why I never tried to do anything. I never became ambitious. And so it's like, these brothers had the same upbringing, the same father, but they interpreted it in a different way. And so that's the thing, is that if we allow our past to control how we are now, and we use that as an excuse for being a crybaby, or being allowing our emotions to take control of us, then that is going to create that story for us that is going to allow us to stay in that victim mindset. But if we say, no, it doesn't matter what the fuck happened to me in the past. I get to interpret that. I get to frame it however I want, and I get to choose what that means and who I become because of that. That's when we have the power. But so many guys are choosing the other path, where it's effectively the victim mindset.
Do you find that most guys respond to tough love, or do they respond to more softer approach?
Wow. I haven't really thought about it. It really depends on the person.
Hmm.
I try to mix in a little bit of both, right? I think. Well, here's the thing. Okay, so it's funny. I was talking to my wife a couple of weeks ago, or so, about this, and I told her, I said, if you have a really close friend as a man, right? The the most loving thing you can say to another man that is a friend of yours, someone that you really care about, is stop being a fucking bitch. She's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
She's like, she's like, a woman would never say that to another. That would not be
Right.
like an endearing thing to another woman. I'm like, no, no, no. If you're a man, if another man, if you're close enough with a man, you trust him enough, you care about him enough to be able to tell him, stop being a little bitch. That's like saying I love you,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the thing is that it's not a question of whether it's tough love or not that men respond to. It's this question of, do you know that this person actually cares, right? And so when I'm coaching guys, if they know I actually have skin in the game, I actually care. I'm not just telling them some shit that I heard or read in a book. I really care about their situation and really want to help them. Then I can give them the tough love. Then I can tell them, stop being a little bitch. But if I'm just being an asshole, if I'm coaching someone and I'm just like, stop being a little bitch, whatever, and they don't feel like I actually care, then all of those words are not going to matter. It's not going to help at all. It's just going to discourage a person. But when someone knows that you care and they trust you, then that tough love is meaningful.
Yeah, it's that impact, right? When somebody feels that connection with you, it's a lot more impactful. when they know that you care, without a doubt. All right, talk to me a little bit about men, how they align themselves. There's always a sense of comparison, right, with the next guy, with the next guy, with the next guy.
Mm.
And, it's always about, how can I outdo that other guy? Or, this guy has something, I don't have it. Or look at him, they chose him and they haven't chosen me. I've worked my butt off. This type, it's almost the victim mentality in some ways, but it's also a sense of lacking self-worth, right?
Mm.
So when men, what do you do to kind of revamp the way that a man sees himself so he can start valuing himself at a higher level?
Yeah, that's great. It's so funny that you're saying this because I literally have a coaching client I was just talking to yesterday who has the most paranoid mindset that I have ever encountered. Now, he came from a very abusive situation growing up,
Yeah.
like horrible situation where he wasn't even allowed to go to school, and both of his parents drug addicts, abused him, all kinds of horrible stuff that happened to him. And so because of that, his self-worth is in the toilet. It is horrible, right? He thinks that he has such a paranoid mindset that he believes that everyone is out to get him. Like innocent transactions that happen or conversations that he has, he sees it as them attacking him, as them degrading him and belittling him when they're just having an innocent conversation, right? And so it's that bad. And so what I've been working on with him and what I've been telling him is to understand what's happening is that his value, his estimation of himself is based on what other people are saying. It's not
Mhm.
based on
Mhm.
himself, on his own judgment, because he says, well, I value the opinion of my own opinion, how I think about myself more than other people. And I said, well, okay, I believe that you believe that. However, here's the thing, you're forming your opinion of yourself based on how other people are reacting to you.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And
Yeah.
so you think that's your opinion, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so, the way I've been helping him is to help him to understand that you need to disconnect all of that. You need to stop caring what other people think, stop paying attention to that's their business. What they think of you, what they say, that's is totally their business. What's your business is what do you actually think about the things that you're doing and where you are in life and what you've accomplished in life, right? That what do you think? Not a comparison to other people, not what other people think about this, but what do you think? And he's never thought like that before, right? Most men actually in society today, and it's really actually the hallmark of masculinity is self-judgment of seeing yourself as the most important judge in your life. Most men have not experienced that because we live in a social media society where we are constantly getting the opinions of others, where we put ourselves out on the internet. I mean, this guy, he put himself on some forums, Reddit or Discord, and had people rate him and rated him as a 4 in looks. And I'm like, this black pill kind of mindset is so destructive because we're using other people's opinion to form our opinion of ourselves. And the real key to this, and this is what I've been working on him with, is that our internal controls our external. However, we are internally, that is going to change our external world, even how we look and appear to other people. And so I told him, I said, look, if you walk into a room and you think everybody hates you and you think that everybody dislikes you, okay, well, what's happening? You hate them. You dislike them. You're prejudging them. And so what happens when you do that? It becomes true because you're putting out this energy, this needy energy, and this hateful energy towards all these other people who you're prejudging. But when you walk into a room and you're like, these people are wonderful. I love these people.
Yeah.
These people love me. Like I'm
Yeah.
such a great guy. Whatever someone tells me, I can't be convinced otherwise. I'm awesome. They're awesome. I love these people. Then it becomes true. And so that's the thing about it is that it's a matter of changing that internal belief and really relying on your own judgment. So what do you think about the things that you're doing? It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it, because the other thing I told him is that, look, you know, the crowd, I don't pay attention to praise or criticism from the crowd. Why? Because when you're winning, when you're on top, everybody loves you and they praise you. And when you're losing, they hate you. And so it's worthless. It's not very worthwhile to me if people are changing their opinion on me based on whether I'm on top or on the bottom. That has nothing to do with who I actually am, right? And so I don't consider that. I think it's worthless to try and please the crowd because their opinion is stupid. It will change. It's finicky. It'll change at the drop of a hat. As soon as I'm losing, they're going to turn on me. So whose opinion do I care about? I care about my own opinion. And so really the key to self-esteem and self-worth is caring about your opinion more than anyone else in your life, right? If I go and I run a marathon, I'm not going to ever be the fastest guy running a marathon. I know because I'm 240 pounds. But when I run a marathon and I get my time under, 4 hours, and that's an accomplishment for me, that's all I care about, right? I even told him in the coaching, I'm like, look, dude, if we do coaching and we do coaching for a couple of years and I'm sitting here on this coaching call and I'm pouring my heart into it and I'm giving you the best wisdom and best advice that I can and doing everything that I can to help you in your life and you don't change shit, I still won in my estimation because I don't care about the result. Like I want you to have a good life and I want you to get results out of this coaching and to do the things I'm telling you. But if you don't do jack shit, I know that I've done a fantastic fucking job and I'm pleased with myself and I have a high estimation of myself because of that. And that's the thing is that so much of society has trained young men to value the opinions of others over themselves, to rate them, to
Mm,
let the internet rate them and tell
right.
them that they're ugly or that they're never going to get laid or whatever that kind of bullshit is,
Yeah.
instead of valuing their own opinion. And really, the hallmark of being a man is valuing your opinion above the opinions of others. No man that you would trust is a man that values other people's opinions over others. And women sense that as weakness. They can smell it on you. They can smell it on you that you care more about what other people think or what they think about you than what you think about yourself. And that makes you weak. That makes you pathetic. That gives women the quote ick. That's that thing that has to change.
I love it, man. Love it. Listen, John, man, it has been an honor to have you on here. Where can people find you? Where they follow you? You take your coaching, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube, Bulldog Mindset. You can go to my website, bulldogmindset.com. And if you happen to be a software developer and you'd like to build a personal brand for yourself, I just launched a new thing called Rockstar Developer University. You can find that on my other site, simpleprogramming.com. But yeah, if you want one-on-one coaching for me, bulldogmindset.com, shoot me an email, and yeah, we can go from there.
Awesome, man. Again, I would love to chat for hours with you because this is a conversation that we can have for hours
Yeah.
and hours. Thank you again for being on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Rafa.